David Chen never expected his roadside auto repair business would save lives. On a freezing winter night, he discovered a desperate mother and her feverish child stranded miles from the nearest hospital. His decision to help them that night caught the attention of someone powerful. The next morning, 3 black government SUVs surrounded his mobile repair van, and David's world was about to be turned upside down. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The endless highways of Montana stretched before David Chen like ribbons of possibility, disappearing into the shadow of snow-capped mountains. For the past 5 years, his home had been a converted Mercedes Sprinter van, custom-built to serve as both a mobile repair shop and his sanctuary on wheels. The idea had come to him after his own sister had been stranded in these mountains years ago, waiting 6 terrifying hours for help that almost came too late. Sarah had nearly frozen that night, and David had vowed that no one else would face that kind of helplessness on his watch. His mobile repair service, Highway Guardian Services, wasn't exactly making him rich. The van's custom tool storage, state-of-the-art diagnostic equipment, and comprehensive emergency supplies had cost him his life savings, and then some. He'd even taken out a second mortgage on his Seattle condo to fund this dream. Most mechanics thought he was crazy, giving up a 6-figure position at a prestigious Seattle dealership to drive remote highways helping stranded motorists. His former boss had called him a fool, but David had never felt more fulfilled than when he was helping people in their moments of desperation. His only companion was Max, a retired search-and-rescue German shepherd who'd served with Montana's emergency services for 7 years. The dog had been a gift from the Andersons, a grateful family whose teenage son David had helped during a brutal blizzard last winter. The boy had been trapped in his car for hours, and Max had sensed his presence even through 3 feet of snow. Since then, the shepherd had become not just a companion, but a crucial partner, seeming to have a 6th sense for trouble. He would often grow restless and alert just minutes before their emergency hotline would ring, as if he could sense distress calls before they came in. David's reputation had grown among the local communities spanning 3 counties. The locals had started calling him the Highway Guardian, and his number was posted in every small-town diner, gas station, and community board across the region. He operated on a pay-what-you-can basis, never turning away someone in need. Some days, payment came in the form of home-cooked meals, hand-knitted scarves, or simple promises to help the next stranded soul they encountered. The elderly Mrs. Peterson from Twin Bridges kept him supplied with her famous apple pies, and the Johnson family from Lima always made sure he had a hot meal waiting whenever he passed through. His mobile workshop was a marvel of efficiency that had taken months to perfect. Advanced solar panels powered his professional-grade tools, and a small surveillance drone helped him scout difficult terrain or locate vehicles stranded off the main roads. The van's interior was a testament to innovative design, transforming from a fully equipped workshop to comfortable living quarters in minutes. A compact bed folded seamlessly into the wall, and a tiny but efficient kitchen housed his most prized possession, a commercial-grade coffee maker that brewed what locals swore was the strongest coffee in Montana. Every tool had its designated place, every supply was meticulously inventoried, and his emergency medical kit rivaled those of some ambulances. Life had fallen into a comfortable rhythm that felt more like a calling than a job. During daylight hours, David handled routine repairs: dead batteries, flat tires, overheated engines, and broken belts. At night, he'd park at one of his designated spots along the highway, strategically chosen for optimal coverage of the most isolated stretches of road. He'd spend evenings updating his technical manuals, maintaining his certification requirements, or video chatting with Sarah in Seattle, who still thought he was going through a phase and regularly sent him job postings for real mechanic positions. What most people didn't know was that David's mobile mechanic service was actually part of a larger mission. For the past 3 years, he'd been quietly documenting the dangerous sections of Montana's highways, creating detailed reports about needed repairs, unsafe conditions, and potential improvements. His background in civil engineering, combined with his mechanical expertise, gave him a unique perspective on infrastructure safety. He dreamed of presenting this data to the State Transportation Department, hoping to prevent accidents before they happened, rather than just helping their victims. That winter had been particularly harsh, even by Montana standards. Record-breaking snowfall and treacherous ice had made the mountain passes nearly impassable, and David's emergency calls had more than doubled. He'd started working closely with local emergency services, often arriving at stranded vehicles before ambulances could reach them. His medical training, acquired during his brief stint as an Air Force mechanic, had proved invaluable more than once, earning him the respect of local first responders. But nothing in his experience, not his military service, not his engineering degree, not even his years on the road, had prepared him for the night that would change everything. As December's bitter winds howled across the mountains like hungry wolves, David had no way of knowing that his next rescue would connect him to a classified government program so secret, its existence would shake the foundations of everything he believed about his country's transportation infrastructure. The call came in just after midnight. Outside, the temperature had plunged to 15 below zero, and the wind chill made it feel even colder. David had just finished his nightly maintenance routine on the van when his emergency line lit up with an unfamiliar number. Max's ears perked up before the first ring even finished, and David knew immediately this wasn't going to be a routine call. "Highway Guardian Services," he answered, already reaching for his thermal gear. The voice on the other end was barely audible over the howling wind in the background. A woman, trying to keep her voice steady but clearly terrified. "Please, please help us," she whispered. "My daughter's burning up with fever. We've been stuck here for hours. Our car won't start, and my phone's almost dead. We're somewhere on Route 287, past the old mining town. I can see a broken fence with red markings." David knew exactly where she was, a notorious stretch of highway where the cell service was spotty at best. It was an area he'd marked in his infrastructure report as desperately needing emergency call boxes. He grabbed his tablet, pulling up the thermal imaging drone's control panel. "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. I'm David Chen, and I'm about 40 minutes from your location. Do you have any heat in the car?" He was already moving, his practiced routine turning the van from living space to rescue vehicle in seconds. "No," she replied, her voice cracking. "The engine died completely about 3 hours ago. I've been trying to keep Emma warm, but she's getting worse. The hospitals were too far, and I thought we could make it to my sister's place in Helena." Her voice trailed off into what sounded like a suppressed sob. David switched to his satellite phone. Cell service wouldn't be reliable where he was headed. "Listen carefully, I'm going to hang up and call you right back on a different line. Then I want you to turn off your phone to save battery. I'll need it working when I get closer to find you." After switching lines and getting her on the satellite connection, David gathered more details while navigating the treacherous mountain roads. The woman's name was Rebecca Martinez, and her daughter Emma was 7. They'd been traveling from Bozeman to Helena when their car started making strange noises. Then the check engine light came on, and before they could reach the next town, everything just died. Emma's fever had started the day before. Strep throat, the urgent care doctor had said. But it had gotten worse quickly, and when Emma became delirious, Rebecca decided to risk the late-night drive to her sister's house. The regular route was closed due to avalanche warnings, forcing them onto this remote stretch of 287. As David carefully maneuvered through the snowy darkness, Max sat alert in the passenger seat, his breath fogging the window. The shepherd's training seemed to kick in. He knew this was a rescue mission. David had equipped his van with advanced off-road lights that cut through the darkness like laser beams, but the swirling snow made visibility a constant challenge. He switched on his drone's thermal imaging system, launching the small aircraft ahead of his position. The screen lit up with a heat signature about 8 miles ahead. A cold car with 2 warm bodies inside. Perfect positioning, just where Rebecca had described. "I've got your location," he radioed to Rebecca. 20 minutes out. How's Emma doing?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "She's sleeping, but her breathing seems faster than normal. I've been trying to keep her warm with my coat, but it's so cold. Rebecca's voice trembled. I don't know what I'd have done if you hadn't answered. The last 3 services I called said they couldn't come out in this weather. David grimaced. He knew most roadside services wouldn't risk these conditions. That's exactly why he'd started Highway Guardian Services. He thought of his sister Sarah, alone and afraid on a night like this, and pressed the accelerator a little harder. The next 15 minutes were tense. David navigated the icy roads while simultaneously monitoring his drone feed and keeping Rebecca calm on the satellite line. He shared stories about Max's rescue adventures, about the time they found a lost hiker in the spring thaw, anything to keep her mind off the cold and her sick child. But in the back of his mind, he was already running through scenarios. A child with a dangerously high fever, hours of exposure to extreme cold, potential hypothermia complications. This wasn't going to be a simple jumpstart. As he rounded the final bend, his headlights caught the reflective paint of a stranded blue Honda Civic, almost invisible under a layer of snow. Max let out a low whine, and David knew they'd finally arrived. But what he didn't know was that high above them, a satellite was tracking his position, and in a secure facility hundreds of miles away, someone very important was watching this rescue with intense interest. David threw the van into park and grabbed his emergency medical kit. The wind hit him like a physical force as he stepped out, icy particles stinging his face. Max bounded through the snow beside him, already in full rescue mode. The shepherd's training was evident in how he circled the stranded vehicle, checking for any hidden dangers before the approach. The Civic's windows were frosted over, but David could see movement inside. He knocked gently on the driver's window, trying not to startle the occupants. The glass was ice cold to the touch. A woman's face appeared, illuminated by his flashlight, exhausted, frightened, but relief flooding her features as she recognized his Highway Guardian Services logo. Rebecca Martinez? He called out over the wind. I'm David Chen. Let's get you and Emma somewhere warm. He helped her unlock the frozen door, which creaked protest against the cold. Rebecca was shivering violently, her lips tinged slightly blue. But her first words weren't about herself. Emma. Please. Help Emma. She managed through chattering teeth. David's trained eye took in the situation quickly. In the back seat, a small figure lay bundled in coats, her face flushed with fever despite the extreme cold. Max positioned himself near the back door, his body language alert but calm, a reassurance to both David and the frightened mother. David's Air Force medical training kicked in. He needed to check Emma's vital signs, but the negative 15-degree temperature made it impossible to do properly here. We need to get you both into my van immediately, he said, his tone leaving no room for discussion. I have heat, medical supplies, and a satellite connection to emergency services. With practiced efficiency, he scooped up Emma, blankets and all. The child was burning up despite the freezing temperature. Not a good sign. Rebecca tried to help but stumbled, her legs numb from hours of immobility. David hadn't expected to need his rescue training tonight, but he was grateful for every emergency course he'd taken. Inside his van, the contrast was stark. The well-insulated interior maintained a steady 70 degrees, and the medical area was already prepped. He laid Emma on the fold-out examination bench, while Max helped guide Rebecca to the heated passenger seat. The shepherd immediately pressed against her legs, sharing body heat, his rescue training automatically kicking in. She's been sick. Strep throat, Rebecca managed, her words becoming clearer as warmth returned. The fever just kept getting worse. When she started talking about seeing colors in the air, I knew I had to get her to Helena. She watched anxiously as David checked Emma's temperature. The reading made his jaw tighten. 104.8 degrees Fahrenheit. How long has her fever been this high? He asked, already reaching for his satellite phone. Rebecca's answer confirmed his fears. Nearly 6 hours. Combined with the exposure to extreme cold, this was beyond his ability to handle alone. Emma needed emergency care immediately, but the nearest hospital was over an hour away, and in these conditions, Even an ambulance would struggle to reach them quickly. David made a decision that would later prove more significant than he could have imagined. He activated a special frequency on his satellite phone, one given to him by an old Air Force buddy now working in emergency services. "This is Highway Guardian 1 requesting immediate medical evacuation. I have a pediatric emergency, severe fever with possible hypothermia complications. Current location, Route 287, mile marker 142. Civilian access road unusable due to weather conditions." He rattled off Emma's vital signs and symptoms with military precision. The response was immediate and unexpected. Instead of the usual emergency dispatch, a crisp military voice responded, "Copy that, Highway Guardian. Assets are already en route to your location. Maintain position." David blinked in surprise but had no time to dwell on the unusual response. Emma was starting to stir, her fever-bright eyes opening. He focused on keeping her stable, using every bit of his medical training. Rebecca held her daughter's hand, whispering soft reassurances while Max maintained his protective position beside them. The next 15 minutes were intense. David administered fever reducers from his medical kit and monitored Emma's vital signs constantly. Rebecca gradually regained feeling in her extremities, though she refused to leave her daughter's side. Through it all, the wind howled outside, and David couldn't shake the feeling that something about this rescue was different. He was right. The sound came without warning, the distinctive whump, whump, whump of helicopter blades cutting through the storm. But it wasn't the civilian medevac he'd expected. Through his van's windows, he could see powerful searchlights cutting through the snow, and the silhouette that emerged was unmistakable, a military-grade Black Hawk helicopter. As the aircraft touched down on the highway, David realized this night was about to become even more extraordinary. Men in tactical gear emerged from the helicopter, moving with purpose. But what caught David's attention was the insignia on their uniforms, one he'd never seen before. It somehow seemed familiar. The next 24 hours passed in a blur. After the military helicopter evacuated Emma and Rebecca, David found himself completing an unusually detailed incident report. The military personnel had asked him to keep the details of their involvement confidential. Standard procedure, they'd said, though nothing about this felt standard to David. He'd returned to his regular patrol route, but his mind kept drifting back to the rescue. The helicopter's insignia nagged at him, similar to the Air Force Medical Corps, but with subtle differences he couldn't quite place. His military training had taught him to notice such details, and something about this one felt significant. That morning, David parked his van at Joe's Diner, his usual breakfast spot in a small town called River's Edge. The place was empty except for Mary, the elderly waitress who always saved him the corner booth with the power outlet for his laptop. She brought his usual black coffee and a breakfast burrito while he reviewed the night's events. "You look like you've seen a ghost, David," Mary commented, topping off his coffee. "Rough night on the mountain?" Max, curled up under the table, lifted his head at her voice, hoping for his usual bacon treat. David managed a tired smile, but kept the details vague. "Just an emergency with a sick kid. Everything turned out fine." He pulled up his maintenance logs, trying to focus on routine tasks. His drone needed recalibration after the storm, and the van's tire chains needed checking. The diner's TV droned in the background, local news reporting on the storm. David's attention snapped back when he heard the weatherman mention Route 287. And in related news, a section of Highway 287 was temporarily closed last night due to what authorities are calling a routine weather assessment. The closure lasted approximately 1 hour. David frowned. There had been nothing routine about last night's events, and he knew for certain no weather assessment team had been there. He'd spent enough time documenting highway conditions to know when official stories didn't add up. His phone buzzed, a text from Rebecca. Emma's fever had broken, and they were being transferred to a private medical facility in Helena. The message seemed carefully worded, almost too careful. "Thank you again for everything. The doctors here are amazing. Emma's getting specialized care I never thought we'd have access to." Opening his laptop, David began his usual morning routine of updating his highway safety database. He'd been documenting dangerous road conditions, response times, and incident patterns for years. But when he tried to access last night's drone footage to add to his records, he found the files corrupted. Every photo, every thermal scan, even his routine GPS logs from those hours, all unreadable. Max suddenly sat up straight, his ears forward, body tense. David had learned to trust the shepherd's instincts. Looking out the diner's window, he noticed a black SUV pulling into the parking lot. Government plates, windows tinted well beyond legal limits. His military training kicked in again, noting details automatically. No snow on the roof despite the recent storm, mud guards spotlessly clean, antenna configuration unlike any standard government vehicle he'd seen. Mary approached with more coffee, then stopped mid-step. "Well, that's odd," she said, peering out the window. "We don't get many fancy cars like that around here." Two more identical SUVs pulled in behind the first, positioning themselves with practiced precision. David quickly closed his laptop, a familiar tension building in his shoulders. In his years of military service, he'd seen enough to know when something bigger than himself was unfolding. The way these vehicles moved, the precision of their positioning, this wasn't local law enforcement or state police. Max moved closer to David's leg, his training evident in his alertness without aggression. Through the window, David watched as men in dark suits emerged from the vehicles. Their movements were synchronized, professional, military training masked beneath civilian clothes. One of them touched his earpiece, looked directly at the diner window, and nodded. David's phone buzzed again. Unknown number, encrypted message. "Mr. Chen, your assistance from last night has drawn some attention. We need to talk." As he read the message, the diner's door chimed, and footsteps approached his booth. The game was about to change, and David had a feeling his life as a highway guardian was about to become much more complicated. The lead agent introduced himself as Thomas Carter, though David doubted that was his real name. The man's presence commanded attention, military bearing barely concealed beneath his tailored suit. He slid into the booth across from David, while his colleagues secured the diner's perimeter with practiced efficiency. Mary wisely busied herself in the kitchen, though David caught her worried glances through the serving window. Max, ever vigilant, remained perfectly still under the table, his training evident in how he observed the newcomers without revealing his own capabilities. "Your actions last night have brought you to our attention, Mr. Chen," Carter began, his voice low and measured. "More specifically, your extensive documentation of our nation's highway infrastructure has interested certain parties." He placed a familiar-looking folder on the table, David's own research, including parts he'd never shared with anyone. The folder was thicker than David remembered, containing maps and notes he'd stored only on his encrypted hard drive. "How did you get that?" David asked, keeping his voice steady despite his rising concern. His mind raced through his security protocols, the encrypted databases, the coded backup systems he'd built. Those files were protected. Carter's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Chen, we've been monitoring your activities for the past 18 months. Your detailed mapping of infrastructure vulnerabilities, your drone surveillance patterns, your emergency response protocols, they align perfectly with a project we've been developing. Your encryption was impressive, by the way. It's one of the things that caught our attention." He pulled out a tablet displaying a map that made David's breath catch. It showed every route he'd ever documented, every dangerous curve he'd noted, every emergency response time he'd recorded. But there was more. Overlays of data he'd never seen before, patterns he'd suspected but couldn't prove. The tablet displayed heat maps of traffic flow, incident clusters, and something labeled vulnerability indices that made his military training tingle with recognition. "What you've stumbled upon, Mr. Chen, is something we call Project Nightwatch." Carter zoomed out on the map, revealing a nationwide network of interconnected data points. "For the past decade, we've been tracking patterns of infrastructure failures across the country, not random accidents or weather-related incidents, but coordinated attempts to identify and exploit vulnerabilities in our transportation system. David's mind raced, connecting dots he'd never realized were there. The recurring accidents at specific points, the strange equipment failures in critical areas, the unusual patterns of stranded motorists. It all suddenly made a disturbing kind of sense. His own documentation had revealed patterns he'd attributed to poor maintenance or budget constraints, but now a more sinister picture emerged. "The woman and child last night," David said slowly, his coffee growing cold and forgotten. "That wasn't a coincidence, was it?" He thought about Emma's fever, the precise location of their breakdown, the military-grade helicopter's swift response. Carter's expression hardened. "Rebecca Martinez is one of our analysts. Her daughter's illness was real. We don't endanger children, Mr. Chen. But her presence on that road was strategically timed. We needed to confirm our assessment of your capabilities under extreme conditions. You exceeded our expectations." David felt a surge of anger. "You put a sick child at risk for a test?" Max sensed his tension and pressed closer to his leg, a gentle reminder to stay calm. The medical emergency was carefully monitored. Emma was never in danger. The helicopter was standing by from the moment they left Bozeman. But your response, your equipment, your protocols. You've independently created exactly the kind of rapid response system we've been trying to implement. Carter pulled up another screen on his tablet, showing David's van's specifications alongside military response vehicle designs. The similarities were uncanny. Your mobile command center, the drone system, even your medical equipment setup. It's all remarkably aligned with our project parameters. But you've added something we couldn't. Genuine community integration. The locals trust you, Mr. Chen. That's not something we can engineer. Carter leaned forward, his voice intense. "Mr. Chen, we're not here to shut you down. We're here to recruit you. Project Nightwatch needs people like you, individuals who understand both the technical and human elements of infrastructure security. Your mobile operation could be the prototype for a nationwide network of emergency responders, equipped to handle both genuine emergencies and potential threats." He slid another document across the table. "This is a preliminary offer. The resources you'd have access to would make your current operation look primitive. Full government backing, advanced equipment, a team under your command. Your mission would remain essentially the same, helping people, protecting our highways. You'd just be doing it with better tools and a deeper understanding of what you're protecting them from." David stared at the document, his mind whirling with possibilities. The figures on the page were staggering, but it was the operational details that caught his attention. Everything he'd dreamed of implementing: advanced drone networks, predictive response systems, enhanced medical capabilities. It was all there, backed by resources he could barely imagine. "And if I refuse?" David asked, though he already suspected the answer. Carter's expression didn't change. "Then you continue your current operation, though we'd need you to sign some confidentiality agreements. But, Mr. Chen..." He gestured to the window where dawn was breaking over the snow-covered mountains. "Can you really go back to being just a highway mechanic, knowing what you know now, knowing that there's a bigger mission out there?" Max nudged David's hand, as if sensing the weight of the decision before them. Outside, the black SUVs waited silently in the morning light, their presence a reminder that David's simple life as a highway guardian was about to become something far more complex and dangerous than he'd ever imagined. David spent the next hour reviewing the classified documents Carter had provided, each page revealing more about the scope of Project Nightwatch. The diner had emptied, with Mary keeping curious customers away under the guise of equipment maintenance. Even Max seemed to understand the gravity of the moment, maintaining his alert watch position without a sound. The files detailed a pattern of coordinated infrastructure attacks across the country, seemingly random accidents that, when viewed together, painted a disturbing picture. Bridge failures in key transportation corridors, inexplicable electrical malfunctions in tunnel ventilation systems, and a series of stranded motorist incidents that served as probes to test emergency response times. "These patterns," David said, pointing to a cluster of red dots on Carter's tablet, "they match exactly with the abnormal breakdown calls I've been tracking." He pulled out his own laptop, bringing up his personal database. "See here, every major incident in my records corresponds with what you've flagged as potential security breaches." Carter nodded grimly. "That's what caught our attention. You weren't just documenting accidents. You were unknowingly mapping out a sophisticated attempt to identify vulnerabilities in our transportation infrastructure. Your background in civil engineering and military service gave you insights even our analysts missed." The implications were staggering. David's simple mission to help stranded motorists had evolved into something far more crucial. His detailed records of response times, road conditions, and breakdown patterns had inadvertently created a comprehensive map of potential security threats. "The mobile repair service," David said slowly. "It was the perfect cover, wasn't it? Nobody questions a mechanic helping stranded motorists. I had unlimited access to every major highway in the region, could deploy drones for search and rescue, and maintain detailed records without raising suspicion." "Exactly," Carter confirmed. "You built exactly what we needed, but with something we couldn't replicate: legitimate community trust. Your Highway Guardian Services isn't just a business. It's become part of the local infrastructure. People trust you, share information with you, call you before they call 911 in some cases." David thought about his regular clients, the local families who depended on him, the relationships he'd built over years of service. "What happens to them if I accept your offer? I can't just abandon the people who rely on me." Carter leaned back, a knowing look in his eyes. "That's precisely why we want you, Mr. Chen. We don't want you to stop being the highway guardian. We want you to expand your operation, train others, help us build a network of legitimate emergency responders who can also serve as our eyes and ears on the ground." The offer included resources beyond David's wildest dreams. A fleet of advanced mobile response units, cutting-edge surveillance technology, and a team of trained operatives disguised as mechanical apprentices. His simple van would become the prototype for a nationwide network of mobile command centers. Max shifted under the table, pressing against David's leg as if sensing his internal struggle. The shepherd had been more than just a companion. He'd been an integral part of the Highway Guardian operation. As if reading David's thoughts, Carter added, "Your canine partner's abilities haven't gone unnoticed either. We have an entire canine training division eager to learn from your successful integration of search and rescue dogs into civilian emergency response." David's phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca Martinez. "Emma's asking for the nice mechanic and his dog. Whatever you decide, you've already made a difference." The message carried extra weight now, knowing she was part of Project Nightwatch. The morning sun had fully risen, casting long shadows across the diner's worn linoleum floor. Outside, the black SUVs remained, a silent reminder that there was no going back to a simple life. The question wasn't whether to accept the offer. The moment he'd seen those patterns in the data, he'd known he was already involved. The question was how to move forward without losing sight of his original mission. "I have conditions," David said finally, his voice firm. Carter raised an eyebrow, waiting. "I maintain control of my operation. No bureaucratic interference with emergency responses. My first priority stays the same, helping people in need. The intelligence gathering comes second." A ghost of a smile crossed Carter's face. "We wouldn't want it any other way, Mr. Chen. That's what makes you valuable to us. Now, shall we discuss your first official assignment?" The briefing took place in David's van, now parked behind Joe's diner, where curious eyes couldn't peek through the windows. Carter had dismissed his team, recognizing that privacy would help David process his new reality. Max sat attentively between them, his training allowing him to sense the gravity of the conversation. The shepherd's new tactical vest gleamed with subtle technology. a far cry from his old search and rescue gear. 3 hours ago, we detected an unusual pattern of vehicle breakdowns along Interstate 15, Carter explained, pulling up a satellite map on the van's newly upgraded display system. 7 incidents in the past 12 hours, all commercial trucks, all experiencing the same electrical failure. The pattern forms a perfect line leading to the Thompson Pass underground tunnel system. The high-resolution display showed heat signatures of stranded vehicles, their positions creating an unmistakable tactical pattern. David knew the tunnel well, a critical transportation artery connecting several major highways. He'd spent countless hours documenting its vulnerabilities in his personal database. That's a key chemical transport route, he said, already pulling up his maintenance logs on a separate screen. I've helped 2 trucks there in the past month. Both had unexplained electrical failures. The second driver mentioned something about his engine cutting out exactly at mile marker 147. Exactly, Carter confirmed, his expression grim. We believe someone's testing the tunnel's vulnerabilities. If they could disable enough vehicles inside that tunnel during peak chemical transport hours. He pulled up another screen showing traffic patterns and chemical transport schedules. The implications were chilling. David's military training kicked in, analyzing the tactical situation. The ventilation systems wouldn't handle multiple stranded chemical carriers. One spark from a disabled vehicle could trigger a chain reaction. He pulled up his drone's thermal imaging system, making rapid calculations. The tunnel's emergency protocols aren't designed for multiple simultaneous failures. We need to identify who's behind these breakdowns without alerting them, Carter said, reaching into his briefcase. That's where you come in. Your Highway Guardian Services gives us perfect cover for enhanced surveillance. We've upgraded your equipment while we were talking, courtesy of some very interested parties in Washington. David noticed subtle but significant changes to his van's systems. His basic thermal imaging had been replaced with military-grade surveillance equipment that could detect heat signatures through concrete walls. His drone's control panel now showed capabilities he'd only dreamed about. Advanced sensor arrays, electromagnetic field detection, even chemical composition analysis. Even Max's vest had been swapped for one with advanced tracking and communication gear, including a camera small enough to be invisible to the casual observer. The next chemical transport convoy moves through in 6 hours, Carter continued, bringing up a classified transport schedule. We believe that's their target. Your mission is to position yourself as usual, just another highway mechanic helping stranded motorists. But you'll be our eyes and ears, helping us identify the breach points and the technology they're using to disable these vehicles. David studied the map, his mind already formulating a plan. I'll need access to the tunnel's maintenance systems. My regular route takes me there twice a day. Nobody questions a mechanic checking their vehicle before entering a major tunnel. He pulled up his own documented patrol routes showing how naturally his presence would fit into the security operation. Carter handed him a new ID badge, the holographic security features subtly different from standard government issue. You now have Level 4 infrastructure clearance. But remember, maintain your cover. As far as anyone knows, you're still just the Highway Guardian. Your regular clients can't suspect anything has changed. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. David installed the new equipment, marveling at the technology now at his disposal. His simple rescue drone now linked directly to military satellites, providing real-time data analysis of vehicle movements across the entire state. The medical equipment in his van rivaled emergency rooms, with capabilities far beyond what any roadside mechanic would need. Even Max's new vest contained sensors that could detect chemical agents and radiation, feeding data directly to both David's systems and Project Nightwatch headquarters. One more thing, Carter said, handling David a secure phone that looked identical to his old one. Rebecca Martinez will be your handler. She's one of our best analysts, and after last night, she specifically requested this assignment. She's already compiled a detailed analysis of your previous rescue patterns to maintain your cover. The algorithm she developed will help you respond to emergencies in exactly the same way you always have, maintaining your established patterns while gathering intelligence. David thought about the sick child he'd helped last night, now understanding it was part of a larger operation. How's Emma doing? Already back home, and genuinely grateful to her highway angel, as she calls you. Carter's expression softened slightly. That's what makes you perfect for this, Chen. Even knowing it was a test, you responded with genuine concern and humanity. We need that balance in this operation. Too many of our agents forget the human element. As the morning sun climbed higher, David began his regular patrol route, but everything felt different. Each stranded motorist could be an innocent civilian or part of a larger threat. Every breakdown could be genuine or a probe testing response times. Max seemed to sense the change too, his behavior even more focused than usual, as if he understood their mission had grown beyond simple rescue operations. The secure phone buzzed. Rebecca's first message as his handler. 3 more trucks reported electrical issues near mile marker 147. Pattern suggests they're accelerating their timeline. Initial analysis shows electromagnetic signatures consistent with sophisticated vehicle disruption technology. Be careful, David. You're not just saving lives now. You're preventing something catastrophic. I've uploaded detailed scan parameters to your drone. Max's vest sensors are already picking up unusual readings. David watched the snow-capped mountains through his windshield, the same view he'd seen thousands of times, but now with new eyes. He was still the highway guardian, still helping people in need, but he'd become part of something much bigger. As his van approached the first stranded truck, Max alert by his side, David couldn't help but wonder how many other seemingly ordinary people along this highway were also secret guardians, protecting America's infrastructure one breakdown at a time. David approached the first stranded truck cautiously, his new equipment scanning for any unusual signatures. The driver, a middle-aged man named Frank, seemed genuinely distressed about his vehicle's failure, but David's enhanced sensors told a different story. There was an electromagnetic anomaly emanating from a small device hidden beneath the truck's chassis. Complete electrical failure, Frank explained, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cold. Never seen anything like it. Everything just died at once. He showed David the truck's diagnostic panel, which displayed nothing but error messages. David played his part perfectly, acting like the helpful mechanic he'd always been. But as he pretended to check the engine, he activated his new surveillance equipment. Max, following his training, circled the truck in what appeared to be a routine safety check. The Shepherd's new vest sensors transmitted detailed data about the hidden device. Found it? Rebecca's voice came through his earpiece, disguised as a regular Bluetooth headset. That's definitely not standard equipment. The electromagnetic signature matches the other incidents. Carter's team is tracking 3 more identical signatures moving toward the tunnel. David's diagnostic tools, now linked to Project Nightwatch's databases, identified the device as a sophisticated piece of technology capable of disabling any vehicle's electrical systems within a 50-foot radius. The implications were terrifying. With enough of these devices strategically placed, they could shut down every vehicle in the tunnel simultaneously. Frank, David said carefully, maintaining his cover. I'm seeing some unusual interference patterns. Mind if I check something under the truck? The driver nodded, seemingly unaware of the tension in David's voice. Using his phone's camera to transmit images to Rebecca, David documented the device's installation points. It had been professionally mounted, designed to look like standard equipment to anyone without specialized scanning technology. This is military-grade hardware, Rebecca confirmed in his ear. Someone with serious resources is behind this. Suddenly, Max's behavior changed. The Shepherd's posture stiffened, his attention fixed on a point down the highway. Through his enhanced surveillance system, David spotted what had caught Max's attention. 2 more trucks approaching, their engines already showing signs of the same electromagnetic interference. Chen, we've got movement, Carter's voice joined the conversation. 3 black SUVs just turned onto the access road behind the tunnel. Facial recognition confirms known operatives with ties to industrial sabotage. Whatever they're planning, it's happening now. David had seconds to make a decision. The device under Frank's truck was clearly part of a larger operation, but removing it might alert the perpetrators. The approaching trucks would likely have similar devices, creating a cascade of failures leading right into the tunnel. "Rebecca, what's the status of the chemical transport convoy?" David asked while pretending to check Frank's engine fluid levels. 20 minutes out, she replied tensely. "If those trucks make it into the tunnel before we neutralize the devices." David cut her off. "I have an idea, but it's risky. Remember the drone modifications I made last month? The ones you said were unnecessary?" There was a pause before Rebecca responded. "The electromagnetic pulse shielding, David? That was designed for protecting against natural phenomena, not—" "But it could work," he insisted, already moving back to his van. "If I can reconfigure the drone's shielding to emit a targeted counterpulse, we might be able to neutralize all the devices simultaneously without alerting the operators." Carter's voice came back, urgent but measured. "You have 12 minutes before those SUVs reach their position. Whatever you're going to do it fast." David's fingers flew over his van's advanced control panel, reprogramming his drone's protective systems into an offensive capability. Max stood guard, his enhanced sensors monitoring the approaching trucks while David worked. The Shepherd's new vest continued feeding data to Project Nightwatch, helping them track the movement of every vehicle in the area. Frank watched curiously as David deployed what looked like a simple diagnostic drone. "Just checking the interference patterns," David explained casually. "Sometimes these mountain roads can play havoc with truck electronics." In reality, the drone was positioning itself at precisely the right altitude to create a coverage pattern that would affect all the disabled vehicles without disrupting legitimate traffic. If David's calculations were wrong, he could end up disabling every vehicle for miles, including his own van, and any emergency responders. 10 minutes to convoy arrival, Rebecca updated. "SUVs are maintaining course." "David, are you sure about this?" David looked at Max, then at the tunnel entrance looming in the distance. Everything he'd built as the highway guardian had led to this moment. "Sometimes the best way to help people," he said quietly, "is to stop the bad things before they happen." His finger hovered over the activation command. In the distance, he could see the other trucks beginning to slow, their engines failing exactly as planned by the saboteurs. The whole operation had been precisely timed and coordinated, but they hadn't counted on a simple highway mechanic with military-grade equipment and a very special dog. David activated the modified drone just as the two failing trucks limped to a stop near Frank's vehicle. The timing had to be perfect. Too early and the saboteurs would detect the intervention. Too late and the chemical transport convoy would be trapped. Max's sensors tracked the approaching SUVs, now just minutes away from their planned positions. "Counterpulse activated," David announced quietly into his comm unit. The drone emitted an invisible electromagnetic wave, precisely calibrated to neutralize the saboteurs' devices without affecting other vehicles. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, the truck's electrical systems began to restart. "It's working," Rebecca confirmed through his earpiece. "We're detecting cascade failures in all identified sabotage devices. The SUVs are slowing. They've noticed something's wrong." Her voice carried a mix of relief and triumph. Frank's truck roared back to life, its dashboard displays returning to normal. The driver's face lit up with surprise and relief. "Well, I'll be damned. What did you do?" David maintained his cover, shrugging modestly. "Sometimes these mountain electromagnetic fields just need a little nudge to reset themselves." He pretended to make a few final checks under the hood. "You should be good to go now, but maybe avoid the tunnel for the next hour or so, just to be safe." Meanwhile, Project Nightwatch teams moved into position, using David's distraction to quietly intercept the SUVs. Through his enhanced surveillance system, he watched as Carter's operators expertly disabled and detained the saboteurs. The entire operation took less than 5 minutes, so smooth that other motorists never noticed anything unusual. "Chen," Carter's voice came through clearly. "The chemical transport convoy has been safely rerouted. We've recovered 12 more devices from various points around the tunnel. Preliminary analysis suggests this was just a test run for something bigger." David helped the other truck drivers restart their vehicles, maintaining his friendly mechanic persona while his equipment gathered crucial intelligence data. Max continued his practiced routine of checking each truck, his enhanced sensors cataloging valuable information about the saboteur's technology. Rebecca's analysis came through his earpiece. "The devices we've recovered are just prototypes. They were testing our response capabilities, seeing how quickly we'd detect and react to coordinated infrastructure attacks. Your intervention wasn't just a save, David. It was a message. We're not as vulnerable as they thought." As the last truck pulled away, David took a moment to process what had just happened. His simple mission of helping stranded motorists had evolved into something far more critical. The Highway Guardian had become a vital part of national security, operating in plain sight on America's roadways. "There's more," Carter added, his voice grave. "We've identified similar patterns at other critical infrastructure points across the country. What you stopped today was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. We'll need you to expand your operation, train others, create a network of highway guardians who can protect our transportation system." David watched as Max explored the area where the devices had been, the Shepherd's new equipment still gathering data. The morning sun highlighted the snow-capped mountains, making everything look deceptively peaceful. In just 24 hours, his life had transformed completely, yet in many ways, nothing had changed. He was still helping people, still protecting travelers, just on a much grander scale. "The technical specs from your drone modification are impressive," Rebecca commented. "We want to implement similar systems nationwide. Your experience as a regular mechanic gives you insights our engineers missed. Sometimes the best solutions come from people who understand both the practical and tactical aspects of a problem." Looking at his van, now a sophisticated command center disguised as a simple mobile repair unit, David felt a surge of pride. The equipment upgrades were impressive, but it was his years of experience, his connection to the community, and his genuine desire to help others that had made this operation successful. "What's next?" he asked, already knowing the answer would change his life again. Carter's response was immediate. "We've identified 3 more potential hotspots across the state. We need you to expand your patrol route, train some new recruits, other mechanics who fit the profile. Build us a network of highway guardians who can protect our infrastructure while maintaining deep roots in their communities." David glanced at Max, who sat alertly beside him, ever ready for the next mission. The Shepherd's new tactical vest gleamed in the morning sun, a symbol of how technology and tradition could work together. "I'm in," he replied, "but we do this my way. The day we stop being real highway guardians is the day we lose our most valuable asset, the trust of the people we protect." And with that, the Highway Guardian program began its next phase, building a network of protectors who would guard America's roads not just with advanced technology, but with the simple, unwavering commitment to helping others that had started it all. 1 month after the tunnel incident, David's Highway Guardian services had evolved into something extraordinary. His simple mobile repair van had become the prototype for a new generation of emergency response vehicles. The upgrade was subtle. To the public, they still looked like regular mobile mechanic units, but each one contained sophisticated surveillance and counterintelligence equipment. Rebecca had helped design a training program that perfectly balanced mechanical expertise with a tactical awareness. The first batch of recruits included 5 other mobile mechanics from different parts of Montana, each carefully selected for their community connections and technical skills. Max's success had also inspired the integration of K9 units, with each new vehicle assigned a specially trained dog equipped with advanced sensing gear. "Your approach is changing how we think about infrastructure security," Carter explained during a secure briefing in David's upgraded command center. They were parked at his usual spot behind Joe's Diner, maintaining the appearance of a routine morning coffee break. "Traditional security focuses on hardening targets. You've shown us the power of hiding in plain sight." The statistics backed up their success. In the past month alone, The expanded Highway Guardian network had prevented 3 potential attacks on critical infrastructure. More importantly, they'd done it without anyone outside Project Nightwatch realizing anything had changed. To the public, they were still just the friendly mechanics who helped stranded motorists. David's relationship with Rebecca had evolved too. What started as a handler-asset connection had grown into a genuine partnership. Her analytical skills complemented his practical experience perfectly. She'd even started joining him on patrol occasionally, ostensibly to check on Emma's recovery, but really to help refine their response protocols. "The community trust you've built is our biggest asset," Rebecca noted, reviewing data from their latest operation. "When people see the Highway Guardian logo, they let their guard down. They share information they'd never tell a government agent." Her screens showed a map of seemingly random breakdown reports that, when analyzed properly, revealed patterns of potential threats. David's original mission had expanded beyond Montana. Similar operations were now starting in neighboring states, each adapted to local conditions, but following his core principle: genuine community service as the foundation of effective security. His experience training search and rescue dogs had become the model for a nationwide K9 program. "You've created something unique," Carter said, watching Max demonstrate scanning protocols to a new batch of K9 recruits. "These dogs aren't just detecting threats, they're maintaining our cover. Nobody questions a mechanic with a friendly shepherd." The technical aspects of the operation had grown exponentially. David's simple drone modifications had inspired a whole new class of mobile surveillance equipment. His van now served as a testing ground for prototype technologies, each carefully disguised as standard mechanics tools. The electromagnetic pulse shield he'd improvised during the tunnel incident had been refined into a standard countermeasure system. But what made David most proud was how they'd maintained the heart of Highway Guardian services. Every member of his growing team was, first and foremost, committed to helping people. The intelligence gathering, the surveillance, the counter-terrorism operations, all of it was secondary to their core mission of keeping travelers safe. "We've identified similar operations starting up internationally," Rebecca revealed, showing him reports from allied nations. "Your model is becoming a template for infrastructure protection worldwide. The combination of genuine community service and sophisticated security operations is revolutionary." David watched through his van's window as a young mechanic helped a stranded family, his trained dog keeping the children entertained while he fixed their car. To anyone passing by, it was just another roadside repair. Nobody noticed the dog's vest scanning for unusual substances, or the mechanic's tools gathering electromagnetic data. "This is how we win," David said quietly. "Not with obvious shows of force, but by being the helpers people trust. Every time we assist a stranded motorist, we strengthen our cover and our mission." Max pressed against his leg, as if agreeing with the sentiment. The sun set over the Montana mountains, casting long shadows across the highway. David's van, now the command center for a growing network of highway guardians, still looked like the same humble repair vehicle that had started this journey. And that, perhaps, was their greatest achievement. Hiding a sophisticated security operation behind a simple act of kindness. 6 months after that fateful rainy night, Highway Guardian Services had become something its founder never imagined. David Chen sat in his command van, watching a convoy of identical vehicles roll out across Montana's highways. Each one carried a dedicated mechanic and their canine partner, all trained in his methods, all committed to his original mission of helping others while protecting America's infrastructure. "You've built something extraordinary," Rebecca said, reviewing the latest statistics on her secure tablet. She'd become a permanent part of the operation, dividing her time between fieldwork and analysis. Emma, now fully recovered, had become the unofficial mascot of their growing organization, often visiting with cookies she'd baked for the K9 units. 27 prevented attacks in the last quarter alone, and not a single civilian knows we're anything more than helpful mechanics. David watched through his enhanced surveillance systems as his teams worked across the state. On one screen, a highway guardian helped a family change a flat tire while their dog's sensors swept for hidden threats. On another, a team quietly neutralized a sophisticated attempt to disrupt railway switching stations. Each operation was carried out with the same careful balance of genuine assistance and invisible protection. Max, now the lead trainer for their K9 program, sat alertly by his side. The Shepherd's tactical vest had become the prototype for a new generation of K9 equipment, perfectly balancing surveillance capability with the friendly appearance essential to their cover. Together, they'd trained dozens of dog handler teams, each one carrying forward the legacy of that first rainy night rescue. "The program's expanding faster than we anticipated," Carter reported during their weekly briefing. "Similar operations are starting up in 12 other states. Your model of community-based infrastructure protection is revolutionizing how we think about national security." He pulled up a map showing Highway Guardian units spreading across the country, each one maintaining the perfect balance of public service and covert protection. The technical innovations had exceeded everyone's expectations. David's improvised solutions had evolved into sophisticated systems, each carefully disguised as ordinary mechanics equipment. His drone modifications had spawned a whole new class of surveillance technology. Even his simple van design had been refined into a mobile command center that could pass for a regular repair vehicle. But what made David proudest was how they'd maintained their core mission. Every new recruit was chosen not just for their technical skills or security potential, but for their genuine desire to help others. The growing network of Highway Guardians remained, first and foremost, a community service organization. The sophisticated security operations were built around that foundation, not the other way around. "You've changed everything," Rebecca observed, watching a new team complete their training. "Before, we thought national security meant obvious shows of force, visible deterrence. You've shown us that true security can hide in plain sight, wrapped in simple acts of kindness." The evidence was in their success rate. Infrastructure attacks had dropped dramatically in areas with Highway Guardian coverage. More importantly, public trust in roadside assistance had strengthened. People felt safer on the highways, never knowing that their safety came from more than just good mechanics. David thought back to that rainy night when he'd stopped to help a stranded mother and her sick child. He couldn't have known then that his simple act of kindness would spark a revolution in infrastructure security, that his dedication to helping stranded motorists would become the perfect cover for protecting America's critical transportation systems. "We're expanding the program internationally," Carter announced, sharing plans for similar operations in allied nations. "Your model works because it's built on a universal truth. People trust those who help them. By hiding sophisticated security operations behind genuine community service, we've created something impossible to counter." As the sun set over the Montana mountains, David watched his teams move into position for the night shift. Each van was equipped with technology beyond anything he'd imagined 6 months ago, but they still looked like the same humble repair vehicles that had earned the public's trust. Max pressed against his leg, ever vigilant, ever ready for the next mission. "This is our legacy," David said quietly, reaching down to scratch behind Max's ears. "Not just protecting infrastructure, but proving that the best way to guard something is to genuinely care for it and the people who depend on it." The Highway Guardian program had become more than a security operation. It had become a testament to the power of combining kindness with capability, of hiding strength behind service. As David's network of guardians continued to grow, he knew that somewhere out there, others like him were watching over America's highways, protecting them not with obvious security measures, but with the simple, powerful act of being there to help when needed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.